That is all about kyphosis. Next is spondylolisthesis. I told you slipping of one vertebra or the another vertebra is called as spondylolisthesis. Spondylolisthesis is nothing but a fracture or a lysis in the zone of pars interarticularis is called as spondylolysis. There are so many varieties. Spondylolisthesis can be congenital because of dysplastic posterior elements. If one vertebra is slipping over the other vertebra, if the facet joints are dysplastic, what happens? They can't be there at that place, right? It can slip. That is called as congenital variety, also called as dysplastic variety. Second is isthmic variety. Usually there will be a lytic lesion or a fracture at the pars interarticularis, and hence you can have a slip because of spondylolysis. That is called as isthmic variety. You need not remember, but just they are all the types. Degenerative, because of all the degenerative processes starting with the disc, then instability, then facet joints going down that way, this way. If the instability is too much, the vertebra can slip onto the other vertebra, and hence it can end up in degenerative spondylolisthesis. This is more common in L4, L5 level and in elderly population. Okay, traumatic, pathological and post-surgical, anyhow you know. You remove too much of posterior elements to decompress the spine, ultimately nothing is there as a constraint for it, this can slip. That can happen in post-surgical scenario. There are all the varieties that can, what are all the things that I have explained. Dysplastic, if the facet joints are not normal, what will happen? This vertebra can slip over this, okay, right? Then pars fracture, if at all there is a pedicle fracture because of trauma, this vertebra can slip over this. Spondylolisthesis, traumatic spondylolisthesis, right? Degenerative spondylolisthesis, if there is too much of instability, L4 vertebra slipping over L5 vertebra, right? The Terry dog sign, if you can see in an oblique view, where will you see it? Terry dog sign is seen in oblique view, where you can see the lytic lesion or a pars fracture can be clearly seen, right, in oblique view. That much you can remember, that much if you can remember, it is more than sufficient for your purpose. I told you degenerative spondylolisthesis is seen in L4, L5 levels. How do they present to you? Usually a spondylolisthetic patient will complain of back pain because of instability once they are standing for so long a time. If they stand for so long a time, they have a lot of back pain because of instability, right? Now you have to find out whether the instability is there or not. For these cases, what you have to do is you have to do flexion and extension, that is strained view X-rays. You have to flex the joint and then take a lateral view and extend the spine and take lateral views and see whether there is any translation of the vertebra anteriorly or posteriorly. If the translation is there too much, that means the vertebra is moving every time and it is unstable, and hence you have to fix it. Okay, that is an indicator for you to fix, right? That is one. How do they present to you? One is back pain, and once this vertebra is slipping, the chances of this disc to get degenerated are more. Once the disc degeneration is there, it can go and press the nerve root, causing radiculopathy. So patient can come to you with radicular symptoms, with symptoms of instability. Sometimes if the slippage is too much and there is too much of kinking and too much of compromise of the neural canal, the patient can end up in what? Neurological claudication. What is neurological claudication? What is vascular claudication? Usually neurological claudication is a synonym used for cramps in the legs, more specifically in the calf muscles. Once the patient starts walking, after a certain period of time, because of compromise of the neural canal, the nerve fibers are decreased in number, or there is aberrant firing of those nerve fibers at that junction because of arteriovenous anastomosis going on at the level of canal stenosis. Now the nerves cannot fire any further to support the boy or girl or person to walk any further, because walking requires muscles require neurological support, nerves coming there, that requires firing. But this is not happening properly because of the stenosis, aberrant firing there, and hence what happens? They will have a crampy situation there and they will stop there. But this is not going to go for some time unless you stoop down, sit down and flex, and once you flex, the canal diameter will increase. It increases the neurological supply. Again the current comes, as if current has gone for some time, and the current comes, it supplies those muscles, and again you can walk. But this takes nearly half an hour to 45 minutes. So when it compared to vascular claudication, immediately you stop walking, the claudication will go, the claudicant pain will go, the crampy pain will go. But in neurological claudication, usually the pain will start in the back and radiates down. In vascular claudication, the pain will start in the down and go up. and vascular claudication stops whenever you stop the work, but here neurological claudication needs half an hour to 45 minutes of time, bending posture so that you increase the canal diameter, right, and you have to take rest for half an hour to 45 minutes. That is the difference between neurological and vascular claudication, right. So patient can come with these things, so you have to identify whether it is neurological problem or a vascular problem too. That's why I told those things. So that I told you, whenever there is a translation of one vertebra or the other, there can be a guillotine effect. There will be an effective decrease in the space available for the canal, and that can end up in spinal canal stenosis like this. If the spine is pinched up, you have lot of changes that I have explained just recently, and ultimately what will happen? Patient can end up in a neurological deficit, either motor, sensory or autonomic dysfunction. How do you examine? Once you examine the patient, you can find nearly a crease there at the level of listhesis. There can be a loin crease, flat lumbar spine, this region will be kept flat, and there will be a forward tilt of the pelvis, and once you examine, there can be a step sign. What is the treatment? I told you in the initial phases, you increase the intra-abdominal pressure by giving a belt. This is an indication for it, and you have to, once you support it when the spine is unstable, at the times of instability you support, and at other times once you have regained the tone, increase the tone of the abdominal muscles by doing flexion abdominal exercises like this, right. Then if the listhesis is so much and it is either causing problems because of instability not getting controlled with exercises and your belt, then you have to go for surgery and then fix it. Don't rely upon the instruments, they can give a big hand to you at any point of time. Hence what you have to rely upon, it is fusion. Either you fuse the vertebral bodies by putting bone graft in between, or you fuse both the transverse processes or fuse both the spinous processes, interspinous, intertransverse, interlaminar or vertebral body fusions. So that is to make the spine stable, right. And ultimately, if at all there is a compression on the spine because of this listhesis and decrease in the canal diameter, you have to decompress it. Whatever the pseudoorthosis that is there back, you have to remove it. That is called as Gill's procedure, right. The next one another disorder what we need to learn about the spine before we close is ankylosing spondylitis. It is also something related to the spine. It is also called as Marie-Strumpel disease or Bechtereau's disease. What happens here is, it is an autoimmune disorder, right, similar to rheumatoid arthritis, more specifically affecting axial skeleton, more specifically sacroiliac joints and the spine, and it affects younger population unfortunately. This autoimmune disorder ends up in fibrous initially and later on bony ankylosis, both of the sacroiliac joint, other joints if at all it is affecting, and the spine, and whole of the spine becomes one. What is the purpose of having this disc, facet joints, so many ligaments? What is the purpose? Movement. At the same time you have to have stability with movement. Now when these problems come in, what will happen? All these structures are affected, more specifically the joints first, facet joints as well as the joints at the level of the disc. Disc also is a type of joint. So anteriorly and posteriorly the longitudinal ligaments get ossified, and these ligamentous attachments they get ossified, and the sacroiliac joints ultimately they get eroded and get fused. Whole of the spine becomes one unit. That is an unfortunate problem occurring in younger population, that is ankylosing spondylitis. It is an autoimmune disorder actually, and this autoimmunity is related directly with HLA-B27. More than 85% of the patients with ankylosing spondylitis will have HLA-B27 positive, right. Initially it starts as synovitis, later followed by cartilage destruction and then bony erosion. This cartilage is there where? Subchondral plate is a cartilage, there the problem can start, and there is a cartilage in the facet joints also. When these things are affected, spine is directly affected, ultimately ending up in a fusion of the spine all throughout top to bottom. Ultimately what is going to happen? You have a fused spine, purpose of stability as well as mobility is gone. Spine will become stiffened, more stable, but unfortunately it is absolutely rigid and useless, right. How do those patients present to you? These are young adults, more specifically more males, 10 times more affected than females. They come to you with initially low backache, more specifically related either to a lower back in the lumbar region or sacroiliac joints. They come with low backache, and this low backache is more common early in the mornings. This is called as morning stiffness. I told you this is an inflammatory pathology. Inflammatory pathologies have morning stiffness. Just remember this point, ankylosing spondylitis. A classical presentation would be a young adult complaining of stiffness lower in the back early in the morning, more specifically morning stiffness, and or else patient may be having more pain, worst pain when the muscle tone has gone, either when you are resting or just after the rest. Patient will be complaining of either backache or even radicular symptoms too. So if at all there is so much of exostosis, spondylophyte formation and all these things pressing on the roots, okay, and he gets better only after he walks about and does some exercise to get these protective muscle spasm back. Sometimes the sacroiliac joint and spine might not be affected. Usually the joints, major joints like hip joint, knee joint, shoulder joints are affected at times. That can be an unusual presentation, and sometimes just they get an affection in the bowel, Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. They also have HLA-B27. So sometimes these patients, they can just present to you with other symptoms other than the spine problems. Okay, when you examine, first I told you sacroiliac joint is the most important organ to get affected. You examine for tenderness over the sacroiliac joint and compression of the sacroiliac joint from side to side, and you can as well distract and see. You can do a straight leg raising test. You can do, I have shown you what is Jensen's test, get out of the bed and strain, and pump handle test. You flex the hip joint and then push it onto the other shoulder joint. Suppose when you are the patient, suppose I have to test the right side of yours, then ask the patient to lie down, then flex the hip joint, flex the knee joint and press it onto the abdomen, and then adduct it so that it faces the left shoulder joint. Once you are doing that, you are opening the sacroiliac joint on that side on the posterior aspect. That strain will cause pain. Okay, when you are doing pump handle and once you are doing this Jensen's test or Faber's test, you are opening from the anterior side. You are trying to stretch from the anterior side. That causes pain. These are all the tests for sacroiliac joint. Then tests for cervical spine. Cervical spine is the last to get affected. Actually, ankylosing spondylitis spreads from down up. It goes from down region to slowly, ultimately ends up in the cervical spine. Once this is happening, what happens? He will have a stooped posture like this. Once he is having stooped posture like this, you ask the patient to stand straight, he cannot stand straight. So just ask the patient to lean down onto the wall. I just will read it out. The patient stands with his heel and back against the wall and tries to touch the wall with the back of his head. Once this is stooped down, this can't touch there. If this is touching, those things can't touch. Got it? So this is called Fletcher's test, right? This indicates that the cervical spine is involved. Next is for the thoracic spine. Once the thoracic spine is involved, the costochondral junctions are fused, the chest expansion is decreased drastically. Less than 5 centimeters of chest expansion on inspiration means what? Means chest is not expanding. They are all fused. The costochondral junctions are fused and chest is not expanding. Most often patients die of these complications, chest complications, right? You can have extra-articular manifestations like iritis, iridocyclitis, sometimes scleromalacia changes are also seen. More commonly they are seen in rheumatoid arthritis patients, but here more specifically you can see iritis, right, and iridocyclitis.